it's white to move. Black has just played h6. At first, black's position appears to be holding together. One pair of rooks has been already exchanged. The king has several defenders nearby, and white does not have an immediate threat. Most players would continue improving the position slowly. But Spassky does something completely different. At first, this looks impossible. White is giving away the queen and there is no immediate checkmate. But once the g pawn leaves g7, an important diagonal opens towards the black king. Then the knight enters with check, the rook invades through the e file, and even white's advanced pawn joins the attack. Keep this position in mind, we'll come back to it in a few minutes. First, let's return to move 1 and see how Spassky prepared this combination. Hello everyone, welcome back to Queen Sacrifice Legends, episode 30. I'm Aniket, an Arena International Master. Today's game is Boris Spassky against Ratmir, played in the Soviet Team Cup final in Rostov in 1971. Spassky was the reigning world champion. Kholmov was one of the strongest Soviet grandmasters of his generation and was known as an extremely difficult player to defeat. If you enjoy classical attacking games and brilliant sacrifices, subscribe. Let's begin. The game begins with the filter defense. Black supports the e5 pawn with d6 and accepts a slightly passive but solid position. After white challenges the center with d4, black exchanges on d4. Spassky recaptures back with the knight and gets comfortable development with more space in the center. Nothing unusual has happened yet. The game continues with normal moves like g3. Black simply saves his king and white develops the bishop on g2 and prepares to castle. Black develops naturally with bishop g4 attacking the queen, and white simply defended the queen with queen d2. Even though it looks odd to block your own bishop, but this is a top move in this position. Black played knight c6, simply asking to trade on d4, and white challenged the black bishop with h3. So bishop d7 saying no to the trade, and Spassky moves his knight from d4 to e2, declining the trade on d4. This may look passive, but the knight is heading toward the f4 and then h5, where it can approach the black king. More importantly, the move clears the d4 square and allows white to reorganize the position without exchanging pieces unnecessarily. So black continues his development naturally with rook e8 and now b3. The plan is very simple. Bishop b2 is coming. a5 gaining more space on the queen side. Spassky now places his second bishop on b2. White has both bishops on long diagonals. Bishop on b2 looks blocked at the moment, but later it will become one of the most important pieces in the attack. Black plays queen b8 and prepares queenside expansion with b5. Remember that square because later a knight will reach d7 and attack both the queen on b8 and the bishop on f8. White simply castles. Black begins expanding on the queen side with b5. Spassky does not react to the pawn immediately. Instead, he places the knight on d5. This is the first important positional change. Knight occupies a central outpost and also moves away from c3, opening the diagonal of the bishop on b2. Black exchanges the knight and Spassky recaptures with the e-pawn. The pawn on d5 gains space and restricts black's pieces. It also opens the diagonal for the bishop on g2, although the pawn itself temporarily blocks the diagonal on d5. This pawn will later travel to c6 and c7. When it moves away from the diagonal, the bishop on g2 will suddenly attack the rook on a8. For now, however, black must decide where to place the remaining knight. Kholmov retreats with knight d8. The knight is now extremely passive, and black's pieces have very little coordination. More active defense was knight e5, keeping the knight near the center and giving black more control over the king side. But he has to ready with pawn f4 attacking the knight, knight g6, f5, knight e5 goes back, and now there's an f6. What's the point? If Bishop takes on f6, then there's a rook takes on f6, sacrificing the rook, and after g takes f6, there's a knight f4. And now white has weakened the king side a lot, and now his pieces are going towards the black king. And this position will be very tough for black to continue. So that is why he retreats with knight d8. After knight d8, Spassky has a significant advantage. Now we reach the first critical position. Let's pause the video here. It's white to move. Find the move that activates white's final inactive piece and prepares an invasion through the E file. Most players might immediately continue with knight f4 or support the d5 pawn, but Spassky plays rook ae1. The choice of rook is important. Spassky uses the rook from a1 and places it opposite black's rook on e8. If black exchanges the rook on e1, the rook from f1 can recapture, and white will still have a rook controlling the open e file. There is no immediate tactical win. Spassky is simply making sure that every piece has a useful role before beginning the attack. This rook will eventually travel all the way to e8. If you are serious about improving and want structured training instead of just solving random puzzles, I work with students personally. The link to train with me is in the description. Now let's get back to the game. Kholmov retreats the bishop to f8. The move looks defensive because the bishop returns toward the king. However, the bishop will soon become a tactical target. It is standing on the same square that white's knight and rook will eventually attack. Spassky begins transferring the knight toward the king. First, the knight reaches f4 and after c5, and then the knight jumps to h5. From h5, the knight controls g7 and prepares to enter through f6 with check. Black continues expanding with c5, but this queenside play is too slow. Spassky already has the knight near the king, the queen on the diagonal toward h6, the bishop on b2 pointing toward the dark squares, and the rook controlling the e file. Kholmov exchanges one pair of rooks. Normally, exchanging attacking pieces helps the defender. But remember why Spassky played rook a1. The second rook recaptures and white still controls the e file. Black has removed one rook, but the remaining rook is exactly where Spassky needs it. It now has a completely open path toward e8. Kholmov plays h6. This is the decisive mistake. Black probably wants to create some breathing room and prevent white from comfortably using the g5 square. But the pawn on h6 becomes a target. More importantly, that leaves the f6 square available for white's knight. The stronger defense was f6. That would have blocked the bishop on b2 and prevented the knight from entering f6 so easily. After h6, however, Spassky's entire attacking arrangement works. Now we have returned to the position from the beginning. Let's pause the video here. It's white to move. Find queen sacrifice. Most players would continue building the attack or move the knight back towards f4. But Spassky plays queen takes on h6. The queen captures the pawn directly in front of the black king. At first, this looks like a complete blunder. The g pawn can simply capture the queen. Kholmov accepts the sacrifice. Black has won the queen, but the g pawn has now moved away from g7. This opens a diagonal from the bishop on b2. Spassky immediately begins the forcing sequence. The move is knight f6 check. The knight attacks the king on g8. But the point is, it is also controlling h7. So king has to go either on g7 or on h8, and when the knight moves, the bishop will give a discovered check. Kholmov is forced to move the king. And now Spassky plays the second knight move, which is knight takes d7 with discover check. The knight captures the bishop on d7 and moves away from f6. The knight has also landed on an extremely powerful square. From d7, it also attacks the queen on b8 and the bishop on f8 at the same time. The king must return to g8. The king has been forced from g8 to h8 and then back to g8. Spassky has used those two checks to reposition the knight without giving black any time to organize the defense. And in this position, if you are thinking to capture the queen, yes, sure, you can do that. But that's not the best. In this position, Spassky did not capture the queen, but he played rook e8, simply putting more pressure on f8. This is why the first pause movement was so important. The rook that Spassky deliberately placed on the e-file now reaches the 8th rank. Black's pieces are completely overloaded. Kholmov brings the knight from d8 to c6. The knight protects on b8. If you're thinking to capture the queen with the knight, yes, sure, you can absolutely do that. But Spassky found the best move ever possible in this position, and the move is d takes c6, completely hanging the rook on e8 and capturing the knight on c6. Spassky does not rush to take the queen. He first removes the knight that was helping black defend the position. The pawn on c6 is now only 2 squares away from the promotion. Black finally moves the queen out of the knight's attack. But before I show you what he played, if he captures the rook on e8, there's a knight f6 check, which simply forks the king and queen. So after king g7, there's a knight takes e8 check, and rook can't even take it back because it's a double check. So king has to go somewhere, and after that, knight will go back on f6, and here white is completely winning. So after d takes c6, he decided to move the queen on a7, and now Spassky plays c7. Black resigns. Look at everything this one pawn move accomplishes. The pawn threatens to promote on c8. By moving away from c6, it also opens the diagonal of the bishop on g2. That bishop now attacks the rook on a8. At the same time, the rook on e8 and the knight on d7 are attacking the bishop on f8. Black must deal with the passed pawn, the attacked rook, and the attacked bishop simultaneously. Queen cannot solve every problem. Kholmov therefore resigns. Here, black should continue the game with queen takes c7, but now there's a knight f6 check, king g7, and there's a simple bishop takes on a8. And white has got his material back. The bishop pair is so dangerous, the rook is very active, and the knight is just so dangerous. Queen sacrifice was brilliant, but it did not appear from nowhere. Spassky first placed both bishops on long diagonals. He created the advanced pawn on d5. He activated the rook on the open e file. He transferred the knight from e4 to f4 and then h5. He waited until black weakened the king side with h6. Only then did he sacrifice the queen. The combination also shows a queen sacrifice does not always lead directly to checkmate. Spassky received several different advantages in return. He opened the diagonal toward the king, he gained forcing checks, he placed the knight on d7 with tempo, he invaded with the rook, and he created an unstoppable passed pawn. The lesson is simple. When calculating a sacrifice, do not stop after counting the immediate material. Ask what lines will open, whether you are forcing checks, where your attacking pieces can enter, and whether the opponent will have time to solve every threat. Sometimes the queen is sacrificed not for one tactical idea, but to activate the entire position. So that was Boris Spassky against Ratmir Kholmov, played in 1971. If you enjoyed this episode, subscribe for the next Queen Sacrifice legend and comment below, would you have found Queen takes h6 in this position? I will see you in the next one.